So China is taking advantage of this global chaos.
It's partly caused it. A lot of that social media in Israel, in India, in the United States is manufactured by CCP strategic psycho warriors.
So not just taking advantage of it, but actually causing it.
I don't believe Hamas would have had the intel needed to mount that successful attack. I don't think Israel, the IDF, would have had the feeling that Hamas was not a danger, but for complete dissemination in social media of very misleading misinformation and messaging about both Hamas and about the Jewish people, the young people in Gaza, and that that has spread. Gaza and West Bank keep moving each other. I mean, they are taught that the Jews are an evil people. You see that in your textbooks. And then you have Benjamin Netanyahu saying, oh, this is okay, I can live with these guys. You could have expected this. I mean, I'm surprised that Netanyahu didn't expect it. I'm surprised that Mossad didn't warn him. And I've seen this happen. I've seen this happen in so many countries. When you have intel officers on the ground who are giving accurate information, it's not what the bosses want to hear. If the general is told that Ukraine is actually a horror story for Taiwan, if he's the intel chief, the head of military intelligence in the US, he'll make sure those down below will make sure that kind of intel never makes it up the chain of command. He'll stuff it out. And that's what's happened in the West. You are living in a collective delusion about an old world Cold War, a collective delusion about the CCP, that you can bring it, and make friends with it, and a delusion about Russia. Russians are fundamentally regard themselves as a European people. We are now happy as a consequence of the Ukraine war. They now call themselves Eurasians. Thank God, you've done that for us. We are grateful to you for that. But believe me, it's a horror story in Taiwan. Nobody wants to be the next Ukraine. But 40% of Taiwanese voted for number one. Number two, 26% of people voted for Ko Wen-je. And what did Ko Wen-je say? I am a smart guy. And he's a brilliant fellow, I can tell you that. I know him, I met him. I have enormous respect for the guy. He's an amazing chap. And he said, I'm a smart guy. I'll keep peace. I'm not going to fight with these guys the way the KMT is, the way the DPP is doing. I'll keep the peace. So you had 40 plus 26. How much does that become? Tell me in mathematics.
66%, right? 2/3.
Inside the KMT, virtually everybody said, we will handle the Chinese. You had a KMT candidate who was a native Taiwanese. And what happened? Uncle Xi defeated him. Frankly, it would have been, had they left the native, like Li Denghui, had it become a contest of native Taiwanese versus native Taiwanese, I think the peace factor and the fear factor would have probably given the KMT an edge over the DPP. The fear factor is an important factor in any, and that factor would have given them an edge. But the fact is, this candidate, the mayor of New Taipei City, this poor chap, Mayor Hao, on one side, his vice president was hardcore mainlander, as dark blue as dark can be. The candidate number one of the KMT list, hardcore mainlander. He lost the election. He was recalled as the provincial head, as the head of that province, recalled because he was seen as he acknowledged. He says, I'm Chinese. So Mayor Han was recalled. He's number one. He's become the speaker. And what if you have a speaker and there was a KMT majority in the lower house, which could have happened if the Uncle Xi had not intervened and got two hardcore mainlanders squeezing this poor native Taiwanese New Taipei City mayor, and frankly, making enough Taiwanese react who don't want anything to do with the CCP or with China. That is why, in fact, the KMT did so badly. Whereas, on the other hand, William Lai did well because of his choice of vice president. One thing that is a masterly choice, Bi-khim Xiao. Because Bi-khim, on her telephone, she can basically pick up and dial a hell of a lot of influential people in NATO, in the US. She's got credibility. If Biden is hesitating to help Taiwan, she can go over Biden's head and address people and say, look, here I am. We need your help. Like Tsai Ing-wen can, for example. And choosing her made that 40%. I think about it would have been 15% less if it just William Lai and some other person who's also like William Lai. B. Kim Shah was regarded as almost a Westerner. And she gave confidence that the West will stand by Taiwan. And that was very important in giving them that 40% of fearless Taiwanese. That 40%, I can tell you, shows that Taiwan, in the words of Mao Zedong, the Taiwanese people have stood up. They've stood up for freedom. They have stood up and are ready to fight tyranny. 26% of them absolutely. I mean, Mayor Kerr is definitely no CCP man. He's definitely not not a votary at all of unification. As I said, I have had the privilege of meeting him. I know all three party leaders well. Frankly, I never met William Lai so far, but I know B. Kim very well. I know Dr. Tsai very well. I presume next time I go to Taiwan, I will be meeting Dr. Lai before hopefully he takes over. I would like to go there. But I haven't met him. But other two I've met frequently. And none of them, as Mayor Howe, Mayor Kerr, none of them want anything to do with unification. None of them. As for Ma wants unification under the KMT. He doesn't want unification under the CCP. So he's not the demon, frankly, that, he's portrayed to be. I mean, frankly, I know the guy very well. I was the first visitor Ma Ying-jeou met officially when he was sworn in as president. I was the last foreign visitor to meet him on the last day of his presidency. So I have a sentimental attachment I got a very big attachment to Dr. Tsai also, because I think, I was a host in India, and I was really, all of us were struck by her commitment to democracy, her commitment to freedom, and her commitment in her own party. Her biggest critic in the party, the guy who resigned the prime ministership to fight against her and replace her, big mistake in my view, she made him the vice presidential candidate. What better symbol of democracy can be than that? William Lai opposed Dr. Tsai. He fought against her, didn't want a second term for her. He resigned as prime minister to fight the DPP election. It weakened the DPP, but she made him the vice presidential candidate. Her vice president. So that is democracy, and that is the Taiwanese people. So I'd like to say very frankly, Uncle Xi, frankly, is not going to. In Taiwan, I would like to say a rough mathematical guess. At most, about 5 or 6% are in favor of unification, given the current ceteris paribus mean as things are. Given that, about maybe 5 or 6%.
You mentioned earlier that Indian soldiers are not marshmallows. With the West perhaps being in decline, is it possible for India to become a major military power in the Indo-Pacific, particularly if China invades Taiwan? India as a democratic military power.
Well, I'd like to say that if Biden's diplomacy were a little smarter, I think conversations must be taking place. Now, frankly, I have no connection with anybody in the Indian government, quite frankly. Yes, I have been the main organizer for this India-Russia. This is a track 2 thing. Government is not involved. But I'm sure that conversations have taken place about that. And what our Navy can do, if the Chinese blockade Taiwan, our Navy can ensure that no Chinese ship ever crosses the Red Sea. We can do a far better job than the Houthis ever will. And by the way, Houthis have made it very clear, no Russian ships, no Chinese ships, no Indian ships. They specifically exempted us also. And that includes Indian cargo now. So, frankly, we are the 3 little countries that are exempt from this Houthi embargo because we've got very good relations with the Shia, for example, Iran and all that. The only country that's suffering Shia terror is Israel. And that was because of the mistake made by Ariel Sharon in the 1980s to go on the side of the Maronite Christians against the Muslim Shiites. I think there's no point getting involved in a religious tension in Lebanon, and he jumped into it. and he took one side. And so the only country where you got active Shia terror, and that's why I can't blame Israel for being totally opposed to Iran, is Israel. Now, we don't want to follow Israel's example. We are very friendly with them, thank you. And we don't want to, we have got Wahhabi terror. We don't want Khomeini's terror. Khomeini's terror is way more virulent than Wahhabi terror, frankly. And I have come in close contact with both. I think Khomeini's terror, and Khomeinism is not Shia. Wahhabism is not Sunni Islam. There's a big difference. You look at the UAE, the Prime Minister of India, Mr. Narendra Modi, who's being demonized in the New York Times and Washington Post and the Guardian and the Deutsche Welle and CNN and VOA and BBC as anti-Muslim, and the Muslim world is absolutely detests him. For God's sake, he was received as a brother in Abu Dhabi. He inaugurated a giant temple in Abu Dhabi, a temple built across the same stone architecture of our temples of 4,000 years ago. And he was embraced by the Sheikh. And guess what's coming up in Ayodhya when the Ram temple, everybody mentions about the mosque being demolished. And they say, oh, these fellows went and demolished. Two things. One, a few kilometers from there, a magnificent new mosque is going to come up. And I'm very certain that you're going to have some very important people in countries that are majority Muslim attending that particular ceremony. A very magnificent mosque is going to come up. What is being demanded, what is being requested is three holy sites. It's the Makkah, Medina, and Al-Aqsa of the Hindus. Kashi, Mathura, and Ayodhya. You can't change them. Kashi was where Lord Shiva manifested and gave the Kashi Vishwanath temple its original lingam, that the stone carving, which is representational of the power of Shiva. Mathura was where Lord Krishna was born, the birthplace. You can't change a birthplace, right? I can't change my birthplace. Now somebody else is there in it. I can't change that. You can't change the birthplace of Lord Ram. But according to Western, people, these are all mythic. Anything that goes back in time, 1,000 years, it's all myth. It doesn't exist. You don't say that for the Greeks. You don't say that for Romans. You don't say that for Chinese. You say that for Indians. Why? It's not myth. It's a fact. There is Lord Ram. I mean, he's there in our minds. And there was a birthplace, otherwise nothing more. So my point is, the world is changing around you. Let's not live in, and so far as Taiwan is come, Taiwan is changed. And believe me, I can tell you, the Ukrainian example, and a lot of these generals go to Taiwan and say, don't worry, you'll be the next Ukraine. And believe me, that cost the DPP 1% more vote each time that happens. It's a disaster. Ukraine is a horror story, and Taiwan doesn't want to be a horror story. There are very smart people out there. And believe me, I can tell you, we don't want to see the Chinese take over Taiwan. No way. Apart from the fact that we want TSMC to come and we want a very high-tech IT. India, Taiwan, we don't want IC, integrated, India and China. We cannot integrate India and communist China. We want IT. But I'm sure that discussions are going on as to how, but I must say that Biden has been extremely unhelpful by some of the lefties in his cabinet. You have people like Ilhan Omar, whom I went long back when she was elected, I said she's a gift to the Republican Party. And she is. The way she talks about Israel and the Jewish people, it's absurd. And Hamas, who gave Hamas the confidence? The confidence they had was if you take so many hostages, nothing will happen to you. IDF, I mean, it's ridiculous. I said on television at that time, yes, there are so many hostages, but believe me, the IDF is going to go in and make sure the military wing of Hamas, I never said Hamas, the military wing of Hamas, it's eliminated. That is going to be their prime concern. And the IDF is doing it. It's a magnificent fighting force. As for the Jewish people, they have been through hell and back several times over the last thousands of years. When somebody confronts them hell, this time they're fighting back. There's not going to be another Holocaust, I can tell you. And in Gaza, your textbooks are exactly similar to textbooks that if you read in the original Deutsch, the original German, and ich habe, little bit, sehr wenig Deutsch, ich kann sehr wenig Deutsch sprechen. It's horrifying. The same thing. It's almost, it's almost translations. So, sorry, go ahead. As far as Taiwan is concerned, we are not keen on seeing the Chinese Communist Party empowered by taking over Taiwan. I'm sure that there are systems in place to ensure that the Indian defense equip that we have, including cybersecurity, etc., I'm sure that we are working with the Taiwanese on various fronts. But what those fronts are being outside government, I don't know, frankly.